Some mistakes can be forgiven with a simple apology. Others will cost you your entire career in less than 5 minutes. The words hung in the recycled air of the first-class cabin like a prophecy. The flight crew of SkyEdge Airlines Flight 719 had no idea they were about to become living proof of this harsh truth. They saw a black woman dressed in understated clothing, plain black cashmere sweater, tailored grey slacks, comfortable leather loafers, and decided she didn't belong among their premium passengers. What followed was a cascade of assumptions, prejudice, and public humiliation, each misstep driving them deeper into professional ruin. The crew thought they were simply asserting their authority over an uppity passenger. They had no way of knowing they were confronting Dr. Maya Reynolds, a technological innovator and industrial titan who just 72 hours earlier had secretly acquired their entire airline through a quiet holding company. The acquisition wouldn't be public knowledge for another 2 weeks. They believed they were following protocol. In reality, they were orchestrating their own spectacular dismissal. For Dr. Reynolds, this wasn't just another instance of prejudice to endure something she'd grown wearily accustomed to despite her accomplishments. This was an unexpected inspection of her newest asset, a real-time evaluation of the company's culture and customer service. What she witnessed would demand immediate and decisive correction. The flight attendants couldn't have known that their casual prejudice would trigger a corporate earthquake, that their dismissive glances would be evaluated with the same exacting precision this woman applied to aerospace engineering and billion-dollar acquisitions. They couldn't have anticipated that their routine morning flight would end with them being escorted from the aircraft stripped of their credentials, their careers in free fall. In the span of 5 devastating minutes, they would learn a lesson about power prejudice and consequences that no training manual could have prepared them for. They would discover too late that true authority isn't measured by a uniform or a position, but by character and conduct. And they would learn that sometimes the person you attempt to diminish might be the very one who signs your paychecks. This is the story of how a flight crew's worst day became a masterclass in accountability. How casual bias met its match in calm, calculated justice, and how one woman used her power not for revenge, but for necessary correction. Fasten your seatbelts. This flight is about to encounter severe turbulence. Dr. Maya Reynolds didn't look like a woman who could liquidate a Fortune 500 company with a single phone call. That was by design. Her shoulder-length locks were pulled back in a simple, elegant style that emphasized her keen brown eyes and high cheekbones. At 45, the fine lines around her eyes spoke of experience rather than age. The kind of experience that came from building something remarkable from nothing. Her posture was straight but relaxed, confident, without aggression, the bearing of someone who no longer needed to prove her worth to anyone. Today she had chosen comfort over corporate armor. The cashmere sweater, tailored slacks, and handcrafted Italian loafers she preferred when not attending board meetings or governmental briefings. The only hint of her true status was the watch adorning her left wrist, a Patek Philippe Nautilus in stainless steel, its blue face catching the terminal lights as she checked the time. It had been a gift to herself after Horizon Dynamics secured its first billion-dollar defense contract 5 years ago. Maya had never been one for ostentatious displays of wealth. The daughter of a high school teacher and a postal worker from Baltimore, she had navigated Yale on a full scholarship, often the only black woman in her advanced engineering courses. Those years had taught her that brilliance alone wasn't enough. You needed to be twice as prepared, 3 times as confident, and infinitely more resilient than your peers. Dr. Reynolds, a voice interrupted her thoughts. I've just received confirmation that your jet will be grounded for at least another 9 hours. The avionics upgrade is taking longer than expected. Dominic Martinez, her chief of staff for the past 12 years, stood before her tablet, in hand, his expression apologetic but composed. At 38, Dominic had been with Maya since Horizon Dynamics was operating out of a converted warehouse in Baltimore. His loyalty was matched only by his efficiency. I've looked into charter options, he continued. But the earliest we could arrange would get you to New York 3 hours after your meeting with the Pentagon procurement team. Maya nodded her mind, already calculating alternatives. What about commercial, she asked, glancing at the departure board. Dominic tapped his tablet. SkyEdge has a direct flight leaving in 90 minutes. First class is available. A slight smile tugged at Maya's lips. SkyEdge, she repeated softly. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. SkyEdge Airlines, a boutique carrier known for its premium service and sleek branding, had become a wholly owned subsidiary of Horizon Dynamics just 3 days ago. The acquisition had been executed through a holding company with Maya's name kept deliberately absent from all paperwork. The merger wouldn't be announced for another 2 weeks after regulatory approval was finalized. Book it, she said. Seat 1A if it's available. I could use the legroom. Dominic's fingers moved across his screen. Are you sure I could arrange for them to know? No, Maya cut him off gently. I want the standard passenger experience. Consider this an unscheduled inspection. He nodded, understanding immediately. Maya had built Horizon Dynamics on the principle that leadership required direct knowledge of operations. She regularly visited manufacturing floors, unannounced flew on test aircraft, and spent time with entry-level employees. This impromptu flight would provide valuable insight into her newest acquisition. As Dominic departed, Maya returned her attention to the bustling terminal. Below on the tarmac, a choreography of vehicles and personnel moved with practiced precision. To Maya, every system was fascinating, a collection of processes that could be optimized or, if necessary, completely reimagined. It was this perspective that had transformed Horizon Dynamics from a startup into a technological powerhouse that now employed over 15,000 people worldwide. She watched a SkyEdge Boeing 737 taxi toward its gate, its distinctive blue and silver livery gleaming in the morning sun. Soon that plane and all others in the fleet would bear the subtle mark of Horizon ownership. But first, Maya wanted to understand exactly what she had purchased, not just the assets and balance sheets, but the human element, the culture, the experience. Little did she know just how revealing this inspection would be. The SkyEdge Premium Lounge at LAX Terminal 4 offered a calculated refuge from the airport chaos. Muted grey walls, navy blue leather chairs, and hardwood floors created an atmosphere of understated luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the ceaseless ballet of aircraft arrivals and departures, a reminder of the technical precision underlying air travel. Maya chose a seat by the windows away from the busier areas. She placed her leather messenger bag beside her and requested still water instead of the offered champagne. Her attention immediately turned to the operational choreography outside, where ground crews serviced an incoming aircraft with practiced efficiency. Impressive, isn't it? A voice came from her left. Maya turned to find an older white man in a Brooks Brothers suit gesturing toward the window. The logistics, he continued, moving thousands of people across the country every day. It's a complex adaptive system, Maya agreed. Multiple interdependent elements working toward a common goal. I'm Gerald Williams, he offered, extending his hand. Regional VP for Bancroft Financial. Maya Reynolds, she replied, accepting the handshake with a firm grip but offering no further details. Heading to New York, Gerald asked. Yes. Business meeting. What line of work are you in? He inquired, settling into the adjacent chair uninvited. Aerospace technology. She replied simply. Fascinating field. My nephew is studying engineering at Cal Poly. He paused, studying her. You don't strike me as an engineer, though. Maya raised an eyebrow slightly. What does an engineer look like, Mr. Williams? The question hung in the air. Gerald shifted uncomfortably. I just meant, well, you know, the stereotype, awkward guys with pocket protectors. Stereotypes rarely serve us well. Maya observed her tone neutral but pointed. Before Gerald could respond, the lounge's sound system announced boarding for SkyEdge Flight 718. Maya gathered her bag and stood. That's my flight. Safe travels, Mr. Williams. She moved toward the exit, leaving Gerald with an expression of confused embarrassment. It was a minor interaction, but it reinforced a reality Maya had navigated her entire career assumptions made on appearance alone. Maya followed the signs to Gate 42, where a Boeing 737-900 waited in the morning light. The gate area buzzed with pre-boarding energy as she approached the priority lane. A young gate agent, his name tag read. Thomas greeted her with a professional smile. Good morning. May I see your boarding pass, please? Maya held up her phone displaying the digital pass with seat 1A clearly indicated. Thomas scanned it efficiently. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. You're all set for seat 1A. We're boarding now through the forward door. Have a pleasant flight. The interaction was exactly as it should be. Professional, efficient, courteous. As Maya proceeded down the jet bridge, her mind catalogued observations about her newest acquisition. So far, the ground experience had been satisfactory, not exceptional, but solid. As she approached the aircraft door, Maya could hear voices from within the galley. 2 flight attendants were engaged in conversation, their tones hushed but tense. And I told him, if you think I'm working a double to cover Melissa's sick day. Again, you've got another thing coming, one voice said sharp with irritation. Victoria, he's the scheduling manager. You can't just, the second voice began, only to be cut off. I've been with this airline for 20 years, Elena. I know how to handle scheduling. Now help me finish this setup before they start boarding. Maya took a final breath of the jet bridge air, steeling herself for the transition from observer to participant. In moments, she would step aboard her newest acquisition as an anonymous passenger. What she would discover in the next few minutes would alter the trajectory of multiple careers, including her own. The threshold between jet bridge and aircraft marked more than a physical transition. For Maya, it represented the boundary between theory and practice, between acquisition paperwork and operational reality. As she stepped from the carpeted jet bridge onto the polished floor of the aircraft galley, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Gone was the hushed refinement of the premium lounge. In its place was a space charged with tension, efficiency, and hierarchies both official and unspoken. The galley gleamed with stainless steel and composite surfaces, the narrow confines packed with service carts, safety equipment, and 2 flight attendants whose conversation ceased abruptly at her appearance. Welcome aboard, said the younger of the 2, a Hispanic woman in her mid-20s, whose name tag identified her as Elena Rodriguez. Her smile appeared genuine, if slightly nervous, her uniform crisp and properly fitted. May I help you with your bag? I can manage, thank you, Maya replied. Returning the smile, the second flight attendant turned slowly from the galley counter, where she'd been arranging welcome drinks. Victoria Barnes, according to her name tag, was a white woman in her early 50s, color with meticulously styled blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. Her uniform, though impeccable, seemed to emphasize rather than diminish the rigidity of her posture. Her eyes, a pale, icy blue, performed a swift assessment of Maya, taking in the simple sweater, the tailored slacks, the absent designer logos. Good morning, Maya offered, meeting Victoria's gaze directly. Victoria's response was a delayed, thin-lipped smile that failed to reach her eyes. First class is to your left, she said, her tone carrying an odd inflection, as though she were correcting a mistake Maya hadn't made. Thank you. Seat 1A. Victoria's eyebrows lifted slightly, a nearly imperceptible reaction that nonetheless telegraphed surprise or perhaps skepticism. She made no move to step aside, effectively blocking the narrow entrance to the first-class cabin. May I see your boarding pass? The question came with a particular emphasis that transformed a routine request into something more pointed. Maya held up her phone, displaying the digital pass with seat 1A clearly indicated. The same pass that had been verified moments ago by Thomas at the gate. Victoria squinted at it, her lips pursed in what appeared to be theatrical concentration. There might be a mistake. I don't believe so, Maya replied calmly. The gate agent just confirmed it. Victoria gave a dismissive wave. The system's been acting up all morning. Things get jumbled. She gestured vaguely toward the main cabin. Economy boarding is to the right through the main cabin. The implication was unmistakable, delivered with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to their judgment, going unchallenged. In that moment, Victoria Barnes had taken one look at Maya Reynolds and decided, you don't belong here. Maya felt a familiar tightening in her chest, not anxiety, but a weary recognition. This moment in various forms had been a recurring feature of her professional life. From the Yale engineering department to corporate boardrooms, from luxury car dealerships to five-star hotels, she had encountered the same assumption that her presence in spaces of privilege required explanation or justification. Behind Maya, Elena shifted uncomfortably. Her eyes darted between the passenger and her senior colleague, a subtle conflict playing across her features. This wasn't the first time she'd witnessed Victoria's selective verification process, but previous attempts to intervene had earned her sharp reprimands about knowing her place. My boarding pass clearly indicates first class seat 1A. Maya stated, her voice maintaining its even tone. She refused to provide Victoria the satisfaction of seeing her ruffled. If you scan it, you'll confirm it's correct. Victoria released a short, sharp sigh, the sound of profound exasperation, as if Maya were a difficult child rather than a paying premium passenger. Honey, I've been doing this for 20 years. I can tell when there's a mix-up. She made a move to physically direct Maya toward the economy cabin. The first class cabin is fully booked. Now, if you'll just move along and let the other passengers board. Maya didn't raise her voice. She didn't shift her posture. She simply remained where she stood, creating an immovable object in the narrow galley. My seat is 1A. She repeated, her voice now carrying a quiet authority that made Elena take an involuntary step back. I will not be moving to the economy cabin. Please scan my pass or get your purser. The word purser seemed to activate something in Victoria's demeanor. It was a challenge to her authority, using airline terminology that passengers typically didn't employ. Her face, already pinched with irritation, tightened further into a mask of condescension. Fine, she snapped, pulling a scanner from her belt. She took Maya's phone with unnecessary force, a small but deliberate physical aggression, and scanned the code with theatrical flourish. The device beeped, a green light flashed, confirming what Maya already knew. For a split second, Victoria's composure faltered. The scanner had verified Dr. M. Reynolds' seat 1A, but admitting error was apparently not in Victoria's professional repertoire. Prejudice, once engaged, creates its own momentum, manufacturing justifications when facts prove inconvenient. Like I said, the system's faulty, Victoria muttered, returning the phone, without making eye contact. That seat is already occupied. You'll have to speak with the gate agent. This was a lie, and they both knew it. First-class passengers were only just beginning to board behind Maya. The cabin was mostly empty. Before Maya could respond, a man in his late 40s approached from within the cabin. His name tag identified him as Richard Wilson Purser. He had thinning grey hair and the weary demeanor of someone who had seen too many passenger conflicts to maintain genuine enthusiasm for resolution. Is there a problem here, Victoria? He asked, his eyes moving between his colleague and Maya. This passenger, Victoria replied, loading the word with unmistakable disdain, is insisting her seat is in first class, but it's already taken. Her pass is clearly the result of a glitch. Richard looked at Maya, his expression one of practiced sympathy that contained no actual empathy. He didn't question Victoria's assertion. He didn't ask to see the boarding pass himself. He accepted her version without hesitation. Ma'am, he began, his voice dripping with disingenuous concern. I understand this must be frustrating. These things happen. Why don't we go back to the gate and get this sorted out? We can't hold up the boarding process. They had formed a united front of dismissal. They weren't trying to solve a problem, they were trying to remove one. And in their eyes, the problem was her. Maya looked from Victoria's smug expression to Richard's false sympathy, then at Eleanor, who was staring at her shoes, a silent portrait of complicity. In that moment, Maya's objective shifted. This was no longer about getting to her seat. It was about witnessing a fundamental failure within a company. She now owned a cultural rot that started with customer-facing staff and extended apparently to leadership. No, she said, her voice soft but resonant in the confined space. We won't be going back to the gate. We will be sorting this out right here. The standoff had created a bottleneck. Behind Maya first, and business class passengers were accumulating in the jet bridge, their murmurs forming a rising tide of impatience. A man in an expensive suit huffed audibly. A woman with designer sunglasses peered around Maya, lips pursed in annoyance. Victoria and Richard were counting on this public pressure to force Maya's capitulation. Humiliation was a powerful tool to make someone back down. But Maya Reynolds hadn't built a multi-billion-dollar aerospace company by backing down. Richard, Maya said, addressing the purser directly, and using his name with deliberate precision. Let's approach this logically. The seat in question is 1A. The cabin is not yet full. The simplest solution is for me to walk to my seat. If, as Victoria claims, another passenger is physically occupying it, we can address that then. Does that not seem reasonable? Her calm, rational approach seemed to momentarily disarm Richard. He glanced at Victoria, uncertainty flickering across his features. But Victoria was already doubling down on her fabrication. The passenger in that seat is a Platinum Medallion member, she declared, inventing a new detail. He was pre-boarded. We can't just ask him to move. It's against policy to inconvenience a premier customer. The implication was crystal clear. The phantom passenger who didn't exist was more important, more legitimate than the black woman standing before them. From behind Maya, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. That's ridiculous. A white man in his 30s with a tech company logo on his polo shirt stepped forward. I've been a platinum member for 5 years, and there's no such policy about not being asked to move from the wrong seat. Victoria's eyes widened at this unexpected challenge from someone who, in her worldview, should have been an ally. Sir, this doesn't concern. I think it does, he interrupted. You're holding up boarding for everyone based on what appears to be completely fabricated policy. This intervention momentarily threw Victoria off script. She glanced at Richard, expecting support, but found him suddenly preoccupied with adjusting his tie. I see, Maya said, a thoughtful expression settling on her face. She was no longer just a participant in this interaction. She was diagnosing a problem within her newest corporate acquisition. So SkyEdge's policy is to trust verbal claims over verified digitally scanned boarding passes. Her question hung in the air, sharp and incisive. It wasn't an emotional outburst, it was a cross-examination. Eleanor flinched visibly. Richard's face reddened as he found himself suddenly off script. He was accustomed to following a predetermined protocol for passenger interactions, and this passenger was refusing to play her assigned role. It's a complicated situation, he stammered. It's actually very simple, Maya countered smoothly. Either my ticket is valid or it is not. Your scanner confirmed it is. Therefore, I am entitled to my seat. She paused, maintaining direct eye contact with Richard. Now I will not hold up boarding any longer. I am going to walk to seat 1A. With a calm, deliberate grace that spoke of years commanding boardrooms and government briefings, Maya stepped past Victoria's shoulder and into the first-class cabin. The effect was like a stone dropped into still water ripples of disruption expanding outward. Victoria gasped, outraged at this breach of her perceived authority. Ma'am, you cannot stop right there. Maya ignored her. The first-class cabin of the SkyEdge 77900 was configured in a spacious layout. Row 1 had 4 seats, 1A and 1B on the left side of the aisle, 1C and 1D on the right. She turned left. A white man in his late 50s with a ruddy complexion, wearing a rumpled business shirt, was indeed sitting near the window. He occupied seat 1B. Seat 1A. The aisle seat directly adjacent was completely undeniably empty. A pristine blanket and pillow set, still sealed in plastic, sat on the plush leather. Maya stopped beside the empty seat and turned to face the crew who had followed her into the cabin. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes were piercing. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The empty seat spoke for her. The man in 1B, William Harrison, according to the flight manifest Maya would later review, looked up from his phone, annoyed at the commotion. He glanced from Maya to the flight attendants, a smirk playing on his lips, clearly enjoying the drama, despite his inconvenience. What's the problem here? Harrison asked loudly, his voice carrying a hint of entitlement. I paid for 1 seat, not 2. Is that what this is about? He seemed to relish the opportunity to insert himself into the confrontation. Victoria's face, which had been pale with anger, now bloomed with splotchy red patches of humiliation. She had been caught in a transparent lie. But instead of contrition, she chose escalation. That is his seat, she insisted, her voice becoming shrill. He needs the extra space. We were saving it for him. It was an absurd, desperate fabrication. Even Harrison looked baffled by this claim. I don't need 2 seats, he grumbled before returning his attention to his phone, absolving himself of further involvement. Richard stepped forward, sensing that control of the situation was slipping away entirely. This was no longer a minor inconvenience. It was becoming an incident that might require documentation and review. "Ma'am," he said, his voice taking on a harder, more authoritative tone, "I'm going to have to ask you to step back into the galley with us. You're creating a disturbance." "I am creating a disturbance," Maya asked, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying more weight than Victoria's shout. "I presented a valid ticket. I was denied entry to my cabin. I was lied to repeatedly. And now I'm being accused of causing a disturbance for quietly attempting to take the seat I paid for." She paused, allowing the absurdity to sink in. "Tell me, Richard, how do you think this situation appears to the other passengers?" She gestured subtly with her head. The other first-class passengers were now all watching, their expressions ranging from discomfort to thinly veiled amusement to outright indignation on her behalf. They were witnessing a power struggle and the crew was losing badly. "This is completely unacceptable," remarked an older black woman from Seat 3C, no longer willing to remain silent. "I've seen this kind of treatment before." A white businessman in his 40s from across the aisle shook his head in disgust. "Just let us sit down so we can all get to New York on time." Not everyone was sympathetic, however. A middle-aged white woman in expensive jewelry muttered to her husband, "These people always want to make everything about race." The cabin had become a microcosm of societal attitudes, with reactions as varied as the passengers themselves. But the majority sentiment was clear. The crew's behavior was indefensible. This was the final straw for Victoria. Her professional veneer, already cracked, shattered completely. "That's it," she declared, eyes blazing with vindictive fire. "You're a security risk. You're being disruptive and refusing to follow crew instructions." She turned to Richard. "Call the captain." Invoking the captain was the nuclear option. It escalated the situation from a customer service dispute to a potential federal offense. Richard hesitated, panic evident in his expression. This was spiraling far beyond a simple seating mix-up, but Victoria's dominant personality once again prevailed. He nodded grimly and reached for the intercom phone near the front of the cabin. "Captain Parker, this is Richard. We have a situation in the first-class cabin. A passenger is refusing to cooperate and is creating a security concern." Maya stood perfectly still, a pillar of calm amid the escalating chaos. She watched them. She observed. She recorded every word, every action, every failure of process and professional conduct. This was no longer just an incident. It was data, valuable information about the company she had just acquired, and the findings were damning. A heavy silence descended upon the first-class cabin as passengers awaited the captain's arrival. The air seemed charged with anticipation, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. Maya remained standing beside seat 1A, her posture relaxed but resolute. She made no attempt to sit, understanding that this confrontation had evolved beyond a simple seating dispute. It had become a test of competing authorities and a revealing diagnostic of SkyEdge's organizational culture. Victoria stood with arms crossed, her expression a mixture of vindictive satisfaction and lingering humiliation. Richard hovered nearby, his eyes darting between Maya, the gathering passengers in the aisle, and the cockpit door, his entire demeanor broadcasting discomfort with the situation he had helped escalate. Elena remained in the galley, visible through the doorway, her face a portrait of conflicted emotions. Several times she opened her mouth as if to speak, only to close it again without uttering a word. Her mind raced with memories of the last junior flight attendant who had contradicted Victoria during a passenger dispute. The woman had been assigned the worst schedules for months afterward until she eventually quit. William Harrison in seat 1B had set aside his phone and was now watching the scene with undisguised interest. His earlier smirk had been replaced by a look of growing discomfort as he realized the gravity of the situation unfolding beside him. "This is getting out of hand," he muttered loud enough for those nearby to hear. "She clearly has a ticket for this seat." The cockpit door opened with a distinctive pneumatic hiss. Captain Andrew Parker emerged, his tall frame filling the narrow space. At 59, he carried himself with the confident authority of someone accustomed to commanding not just aircraft, but situations. His silver hair was precisely trimmed, his uniform immaculate, his expression one of controlled irritation. He didn't look at Maya initially. Instead, his eyes went directly to his crew. "What's the problem here?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that expected immediate deference. Captain Victoria said, stepping forward eagerly. This woman forced her way into the cabin. "She doesn't have a valid ticket for this seat, and she's refusing to deplane when asked. She's becoming aggressive." The fabrications were now so flagrant, so divorced from reality, that Maya almost felt a perverse fascination with Victoria's commitment to her narrative. It required a special kind of audacity to lie so boldly when multiple witnesses could contradict her version of events. Only now did Captain Parker turn his attention to Maya. His gaze was clinical, the kind reserved for malfunctioning equipment, impersonal, irritated, and devoid of curiosity. He saw what Victoria and Richard saw, not a person deserving of fair treatment, but a problem to be efficiently eliminated. "Ma'am," he said, not bothering to ask for her side of the story or inquire about facts, "my crew has informed me of the situation. We're on a tight schedule. You have two options. You can accept a seat in Economy Plus, or you will have to leave the aircraft. We can have you rebooked on a later flight." "What's it going to be?" The entire crew stood behind him, a united front of institutional authority. Victoria looked triumphant. Richard appeared relieved to have passed responsibility upward. Eleanor seemed to be trying to make herself invisible, her eyes fixed on the floor. Maya regarded the captain's impassive face with quiet assessment. He hadn't investigated. He hadn't asked for evidence. He had accepted the most biased, least rational version of events because it was the path of least resistance. He was the final and most critical failure in SkyEdge's chain of command. For a brief moment, Maya felt a surprising impulse to acquiesce, not out of intimidation, but from the bone-deep weariness of fighting the same battle in different forms throughout her life. Would it be easier to just take the economy seat, complete her inspection from there, and address the cultural issues later through policy changes? The thought lasted only a second before it was replaced by a firm resolve. This moment wasn't just about her comfort on a single flight. It was about every passenger who would come after her, especially those who lacked her power and position. To walk away now would be to endorse the very behavior she found intolerable. She held his gaze for a long moment. He expected her to argue, to protest perhaps, to break down in tears. He was prepared for all possible manifestations of defiance or submission. He was not prepared for what she did next. Maya gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "I see," she said, her voice utterly devoid of emotion. "I understand my options perfectly." She turned not toward the back of the plane as the crew anticipated, but toward the open door of the aircraft. To them it signaled surrender, a clear indication that she would deplane rather than accept economy seating. Victoria's smug expression deepened. Richard's shoulders relaxed visibly. They had won. They had successfully put this difficult woman in her place. As Maya reached the galley, she paused and took her phone from her pocket. But it wasn't the airline's app she opened. It was a secure satellite link, a specialized communication device used for sensitive corporate communications. She pressed a single number on her speed dial. The crew watched in confusion as she raised the phone to her ear. Her first word cut through the air, quiet, yet absolute in its authority. "Dominic." Captain Parker's ultimatum hung in the recycled air of the cabin, as sterile and final as a surgeon's pronouncement before an incision. The entire crew arrayed behind him presented a facade of corporate authority, their postures conveying the certainty of victory. Victoria's face was a mask of vindictive triumph, her arms crossed tightly, as if physically containing her satisfaction. Richard looked profoundly relieved, grateful that a messy problem was now in more authoritative hands. The captain himself was a portrait of detached impatience, his gaze unwavering, his authority absolute in his own mind. They expected resistance. They were prepared for hysteria. They had encountered difficult passengers before and had a mental script for every possible reaction. They were utterly unprepared for Dr. Maya Reynolds. In the space of a single extended heartbeat, Maya processed the situation with the same cold analytical precision she applied to aerospace engineering challenges and hostile corporate takeovers. This was no longer a simple customer service interaction. It was a cascading failure of organizational culture, a series of flawed decisions fueled by bias and cemented by arrogance. She looked at their faces one by one, and she did not see individuals. She saw liabilities. Victoria was a reputational risk. Richard was a leadership failure. Captain Parker represented an abdication of ultimate responsibility. A profound weariness washed over her, a feeling heavier than anger. It was the exhaustion that came from a lifetime of having to prove her existence, her legitimacy, in spaces where her presence was questioned by default. From Yale's engineering lecture halls to her first corporate boardroom to this first-class cabin, the theme remained constant: justify your presence. Maya remembered a particularly painful incident during her sophomore year at Yale. A professor had stopped her at the door of an advanced thermodynamics seminar, insisting she must be in the wrong room despite her name being on the roster. When she produced her student ID, he'd simply said, "Well, that's surprising," before allowing her entry. She had aced that course, but the memory of that moment, the automatic assumption of her misplacement, had never faded. The crucial difference now was that Maya was no longer a student trying to earn her place or an employee fighting for recognition. She owned the room, she owned the plane, she owned the entire airline, and that changed everything. This was no longer a personal insult to be endured. It was a fundamental flaw in a complex organization. She had just acquired a culture of prejudice that threatened her investment and the experience of countless future passengers. It was her fiduciary duty to her shareholders, to her brand, and to every future customer who might look like her to excise this cancer immediately. A small, almost imperceptible shift occurred in her posture the moment the passenger receded and the CEO emerged. She gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I see," she said, her voice stripped of any discernible emotion. "I understand my options perfectly." With measured dignity, she turned away from the captain and his crew. She did not cast a final defiant glare. She simply moved her steps unhurried back toward the galley and the open aircraft door. A collective unspoken sigh of relief rippled through the crew. It was over. Their authority had prevailed. Victoria allowed a triumphant, venomous little smile to touch her lips. She turned to Richard and muttered just loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, "Some people just can't take no for an answer." Richard, busy trying to hustle the other queuing passengers, nodded in agreement. "Back to business," he said, his voice imbued with renewed cheerfulness. Captain Parker, his duty discharged, gave a curt nod and turned to head back to the cockpit, confident that the disruption had been neutralized. To him, Maya was already a forgotten annoyance, a piece of human friction smoothed over by the rigid application of protocol. William Harrison, still in seat 1B, watched Maya's retreat with a furrowed brow. Unlike the crew, he sensed something wasn't quite right about this resolution. The woman's composure was too perfect, her acceptance too immediate. She wasn't acting like someone who had been defeated. "This doesn't feel right," he muttered to himself, suddenly uncomfortable with his role as a passive bystander. As Maya reached the threshold between the cabin and the galley, she paused. She reached into her leather messenger bag and withdrew her phone. It was not a slim, jewel-like consumer device. It was a slightly thicker, more robust piece of hardware, its casing a dull, non-reflective composite. The Raya satellite phone. A tool for when you were beyond the reach of normal infrastructure, a device that spoke of remote research facilities, and the kind of global business that could not afford to be out of touch for even a moment. The crew paid her no mind. She was probably calling a friend to complain, or a car service to cancel her pickup at JFK. It was the last gasp of a person who had lost a confrontation. She pressed a single button on her speed dial. The call connected almost instantly with a faint electronic hiss, unique to satellite connections: Dominic. The name was spoken quietly, yet it possessed a resonant clarity. It was the voice of a commander addressing her most trusted lieutenant. On the other side of the country, in the Horizon Dynamics Command Center in Reston, Virginia, Dominic Martinez sat bolt upright. He recognized that tone. He had heard it only twice before, once during a server collapse that threatened to wipe out a decade of research, and once during a tense negotiation with the Department of Defense. It was the sound of Maya's placid fury. Maya, he said instantly. Alert, his fingers already flying across a keyboard, bringing up contingency protocols. Your flight should be taking off. Is there a problem? Our plans have been altered, she replied, her back to the cabin, her eyes watching the crew's triumphant reflections in a polished steel coffee maker. I'm on SkyEdge Flight 7A LAX Gate 42. I need you to execute Code Obsidian. The typing on the other end of the line stopped, a beat of pure silence. Code Obsidian was the Horizon Dynamics emergency protocol for when a company asset encountered a critical operational failure. Unlike most emergency procedures which addressed external threats or technical malfunctions, Code Obsidian was specifically designed for internal failure situations where the organization itself was compromised from within. It triggered a complete command override and executive intervention, Code Obsidian. Dominic repeated the two words heavy with implication. Confirmed. Is there a security threat? Are you safe? The only threat is to this company's bottom line, she replied, her voice as cold as the stratosphere. I want you to ground this flight. Now. Contact the LAX Air Traffic Control Center and Airport Operations. Use my authority as controlling shareholder. I want a hold placed on SkyEdge 719. Under no circumstances is the jet bridge to be detached. Instruct the ground crew to hold position and await direct orders from me. Is that clear? Crystal, Dominic replied, his voice now a low, efficient hum of activity. He was already relaying the orders through secure channels. Then get me Patricia Montgomery. I want her and the entire senior executive board for SkyEdge on a conference line in 5 minutes. Tell them their new owner is on site and is witnessing a complete operational breakdown. I want them on that call in 5 minutes, or they can tender their resignations in 6. It's already in motion, Dominic confirmed. The aircraft is now classified as a static asset. The tower has been notified. Thank you, Dominic. She ended the call and turned around, her expression serene. She walked back to the entrance of the first-class cabin, but didn't try to enter. She simply stood there, a silent, motionless sentinel. Her stillness was more unnerving than any outburst could have been. Victoria noticed her first. Her triumphant smile vanished, replaced by a sneer of irritation. Oh, for heaven's sake. Are you still here? I'm calling security myself if you don't. Her tirade was cut short by the captain's voice crackling over the intercom. The boom of authority was gone, replaced by a sharp, confused tone. Tower, this is SkyEdge 719. We're showing a ground hold order flagged against our flight number. Can you advise we are buttoned up and ready for pushback? The reply from the tower was flat, unemotional, and audible to everyone in the suddenly silent cabin. SkyEdge 718 affirm you are under a ground hold. The order originates from your own corporate headquarters. Override Priority Alpha. I repeat, Override Priority Alpha. Do not close your doors. Hold position at the gate, awaiting further instruction. A wave of confusion rippled through the cockpit and cabin. Captain Parker's voice came back tight with frustration. Corporate on whose authority we have a schedule to keep. Authority is listed as Reynolds, the tower replied. No further information available. Maintain position 718. William Harrison's head snapped up at the name, his eyes immediately finding Maya standing in the galley doorway. The smug amusement that had played across his features moments ago was replaced by a dawning realization. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly very interested in his phone screen. Richard's face went pale. Victoria's mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish struggling for oxygen. Corporate intervention of this magnitude was unheard of. An override from someone named Reynolds. It made no sense. Their reality began to completely unravel when Thomas, the gate agent, burst back onto the plane. He was no longer the calm, smiling professional who had processed Maya's boarding pass. He was breathless, his tie askew, clutching a tablet with white-knuckled hands. Captain Parker, he called, his voice cracking with panic. An alert just came through. It's a red flag directive from the executive office. He stumbled into the galley, his eyes wild. He scanned the scene, the confused crew, the waiting passengers, and the impossibly calm black woman standing by the galley. His gaze locked on her, recognition dawning in his expression. It says there's a code obsidian event, he stammered, reading from his tablet. All operations are suspended. There's a message here for the crew of Flight 719. Do not under any circumstances allow the passenger, Dr. Maya Reynolds, to leave the aircraft. Comply with all her requests immediately and without question. The COO is en route to your location. Acknowledge receipt. Thomas looked up from the tablet, his face a canvas of dawning, gut-wrenching horror. He looked directly at Maya. You're Dr. Reynolds, he whispered the name, suddenly feeling like a thunderclap in the small enclosed space. Maya offered him a single slight nod of confirmation. The name combined with the context hit the crew like a physical blow. Victoria staggered back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. Richard's face had turned a pasty, sickly shade of grey. Captain Parker, who had emerged from the cockpit to investigate the commotion, stood frozen in the aisle, the colour draining from his face. Reynolds, the name of the reclusive genius, founder of Horizon Dynamics. The company that, according to hushed rumours in financial pages, had just acquired a significant stake in a major airline. Before anyone could speak, a new sound echoed from the jet bridge, the frantic drumming of expensive shoes on metal. A moment later, 3 people in bespoke business attire, looking utterly disheveled, burst onto the plane. Leading the group was Patricia Montgomery, the Chief Operating Officer of SkyEdge. Her usually immaculate silver bob was in disarray. Her face was slick with perspiration, and her eyes were wide with the terror Maya had only ever seen on executives who were about to lose hundreds of millions of dollars. Patricia didn't see the crew, she didn't see the passengers. Her eyes scanned the galley and locked onto Maya with the desperate homing instinct of a person spotting a rescue ship in a hurricane. Dr. Reynolds, she gasped, skidding to a halt in front of her. She was so out of breath she had to lean against the bulkhead. Dr. Reynolds, my God, I came as soon as I got the call. I am so profoundly sorry. There has been a catastrophic misunderstanding. Her panicked, groveling apology was the final damning piece of evidence. It was the sound of a corporate officer bowing to the true source of power. The crew stared their minds, refusing to compute the scene unfolding before them. Victoria looked from her terrified COO to the woman she had called Honey, the woman she had tried to banish to the back of the plane. She saw the simple cashmere sweater, the elegant loafers, the understated watch that probably cost more than her annual salary. She had seen a problem to be dismissed. She now understood she had been standing before the source of all authority, and she had spat in its face. The smugness, the anger, the condescension, it all curdled into a cold, heavy dread that settled deep in her stomach. They hadn't just made a mistake. They had committed professional suicide. The silence that descended upon the aircraft galley was a living entity, thick and suffocating. It was composed of the crew's frozen shock, Patricia Montgomery's ragged breathing, and the stunned stillness of the first-class passengers. In this vacuum of sound, Dr. Maya Reynolds was the gravitational center, her calm presence holding every person in a state of suspended animation. The COO's panicked recognition of her name had been the lightning. This silence was the thunder that followed, rolling through the cabin and confirming the devastating scale of the strike. Patricia Montgomery, recovering a sliver of her executive composure, made a move to speak again, to apologize further, to do anything to fill the terrifying void. But Maya raised a single placid hand, and she fell silent instantly. Her gaze had not left the crew. This was not yet the moment for damage control. This was a moment of judgment. Behind Patricia, 2 more executives hovered in the galley doorway. James Atkins, SkyEdge's chief financial officer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, whose usual precise demeanor had given way to visible anxiety. Beside him stood Olivia Wilson, head of customer experience, clutching a leather portfolio to her chest like a shield, her eyes darting between Maya and the crew with growing horror as she pieced together what had transpired. Maya took a single step forward, and the 4 employees of her newly acquired company flinched as if she had brandished a weapon. Her eyes, clear and analytical, moved from one face to the next. When she spoke, her voice was not raised. It was worse, quiet, precise, and utterly devoid of mercy. Let's review the events of the last 10 minutes from a business perspective. She began, her tone chillingly conversational. Let's treat this as a case study in operational failure. She fixed her gaze first on Victoria, whose face had crumpled from smug triumph into a quivering mask of disbelief. Miss Barnes, Maya said, using her surname for the first time. Your role is customer experience lead for this cabin. Your primary function is to act as a brand ambassador for SkyEdge. Instead, you made a series of assumptions based on a visual assessment of a passenger. You mistook understated clothing for a lack of means. You equated skin color with an inability to belong. She paused, allowing each statement to land with surgical precision. You did not consult your own scanner, a tool provided specifically for verification. When proven wrong by that tool, you did not apologize and correct your error. You invented a series of escalating falsehoods. You lied about a full cabin. You lied about a pre-boarded passenger. And you lied to your superiors. The clinical dissection continued, relentless in its accuracy. You converted a simple boarding process into a public confrontation, alienating not just one passenger, but every other premium customer who witnessed it. Maya gestured subtly to the first-class cabin where passengers were watching in stunned silence. You are not an asset, Miss Barnes. You are a walking, talking lawsuit. You are a catastrophic liability to the brand I now own. Victoria opened her mouth, a choked sob escaping. No, it wasn't like that. I swear it was just a misunderstanding. I was having a bad day. For a split second, Maya's composure faltered. A flicker of genuine incredulity crossed her features at this attempted justification. Inside, she found herself wondering how many passengers had Victoria mistreated because she was having a bad day. How many people had been humiliated, dismissed, or denied proper service by someone whose job was literally to provide hospitality. My company does not subsidize your bad days. Maya cut her off, the steel in her voice hardening. Your personal feelings are irrelevant. The moment you put on that uniform, you ceased to be Victoria Barnes and you became SkyEdge. And SkyEdge under my ownership will not be defined by your prejudice. There is no appeal. Her gaze shifted to Richard, who seemed to be physically shrinking into the bulkhead. Mr. Wilson, she said, addressing him formally. Your role is in-flight service manager. You are the designated leader on the cabin floor. Your function when faced with a conflict is to de-escalate, investigate, and resolve. You did the precise opposite on all three counts. Richard's eyes remained fixed on the floor, unable to meet her gaze. You did not ask to see my boarding pass. You did not consult the passenger manifest. You did not question the increasingly illogical claims of your subordinate. You accepted her narrative without a moment's hesitation because it was the easiest path. You chose the comfort of complicity over the duty of leadership. She leaned slightly forward, ensuring her next words could not be missed. A leader who does not question, who does not verify, is merely a follower in a nicer uniform. Your failure is in some ways more dangerous than Miss Barnes's. She is a source of poison. You have proven you are a willing conduit for it. Richard simply stared, his face ashen, his mouth agape. There was nothing to say. She had dissected his professional cowardice with surgical precision. Next, her eyes fell upon Captain Parker, who stood stiffly by the cockpit door, his face a frozen mask of indignation. He was a man accustomed to absolute authority, and its sudden total evaporation had left him in a state of shock. And you, Captain, she said, her voice dropping even lower, carrying an edge of profound disappointment. You are the pilot in command. Federal aviation regulations grant you ultimate authority over this vessel and every soul on it. That authority is not a privilege. It is a burden of immense responsibility. It requires sound judgment, impartiality, and a dedication to facts. She took a step closer to him, her gaze unflinching. When you were summoned, you conducted no investigation. You asked me not a single question. You accepted a third-hand, biased, and frankly hysterical report from your crew, and presented me with an ultimatum. You were willing to eject a ticketed passenger from your aircraft based on hearsay. Captain Parker's jaw tightened, a flash of defiance crossing his features, but he remained silent. The safety and security you are sworn to protect is not merely about mechanical checks and flight paths, Captain. It begins with the fundamental respect and fair treatment of the people on board. You failed your most basic duty before we ever left the ground. You have proven that your authority is a shield for your convenience, not a tool for justice. You are a risk I am not willing to take. Finally, her gaze softened just a fraction as it rested on Elena, the young attendant who stood trembling, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. And you, Ms. Rodriguez, Maya said, her tone shifting from condemnation to something more akin to a final lesson. You are new. You were uncomfortable. I could see the conflict on your face from the moment I stepped on board. You knew what was happening was wrong, but you remained silent. You stood by and watched your colleagues abuse a passenger because you were afraid. Maya felt a twinge of personal struggle as she addressed Elena. The young woman's fear was palpable, and her tearful remorse seemed genuine. Maya herself had once been in positions where speaking up carried significant professional risk, but allowing that empathy to override accountability would undermine the very change she sought to create. Let this be the most important lesson you ever learn in your professional life. Silence in the face of injustice is a vote for the oppressor. Your inaction made you a part of this failure. I hope for your sake that wherever you go next, you remember the price of that silence. Elena tried to speak, her voice breaking. Dr. Reynolds, I wanted to... They would have, I know. Maya said, her tone softer but still firm. I understand the pressures and dynamics at play. But understanding doesn't equal excusing. There are always consequences for our choices, even when those choices are made under duress. Having delivered her verdict on each crew member, Maya took a steadying breath. She turned her full attention to Patricia Montgomery. The courtroom portion of the proceedings was over. The sentencing was about to begin. Ms. Montgomery, she stated, her voice returning to the cool, efficient tone of a chief executive. Effective immediately, the employment of Victoria Barnes, Richard Wilson, Captain Andrew Parker, and Elena Rodriguez with SkyEdge Airlines and any subsidiary of Horizon Dynamics is terminated for cause. Patricia nodded rapidly, her head bobbing like a dashboard ornament. Of course, Dr. Reynolds. Absolutely. Arrange for airport security to revoke their credentials and escort them from the premises now. Their final paychecks will be processed according to standard procedure, but there will be no severance. Is that understood? Perfectly, Patricia confirmed, already gesturing to her colleagues to make the necessary calls. The finality of the order was absolute. Victoria let out a full-throated sob, burying her face in her hands. Richard simply slumped against the wall, defeated. Captain Parker, however, bristled his shock, finally giving way to a surge of prideful anger. You can't just, he began. I can, Maya interrupted, her voice like ice. And I have. Your authority ended the moment you demonstrated you were unfit to wield it. Now please leave my aircraft. An airport security officer, already summoned by Thomas, stepped forward. This way, please, she said, her voice firm but neutral. One by one, the disgraced crew turned and walked the longest walk of their lives back down the jet bridge. Victoria was openly weeping. Richard looked like a ghost. Elena seemed utterly lost. Only Captain Parker held himself erect, his face a thunderous mask of fury, a deposed king being led into exile. With the crew gone, Maya turned back to Patricia Montgomery. The air was still charged with tension, but the immediate crisis was over. Now the strategic cleanup began. Patricia, she said, her tone shifting again, now that of a commander outlining a battle plan. This incident was not an anomaly. It was a symptom of a diseased culture. Your task is to cure it. The first-class cabin had fallen into a stunned silence. Passengers sat motionless in their seats, many still holding phones that had been recording the extraordinary scene. William Harrison in seat 1B had abandoned all pretense of disinterest and was openly staring, his earlier smirk replaced by an expression of amazed respect. I had no idea, he murmured, half to himself and half to Maya. The way they treated you was inexcusable. I should have said something sooner. Maya acknowledged his belated recognition with a slight nod, but offered no absolution. His earlier enjoyment of her humiliation hadn't escaped her notice. She stood in the center of the galley, her presence commanding the space in a way that no uniform or title could have achieved. Patricia Montgomery and her executive team huddled before her like courtiers awaiting a royal decree, their earlier panic now channeled into focused attention. I want a full top-to-bottom audit of your hiring and training protocols. Maya continued, her voice calm but unyielding. Focus specifically on implicit bias recognition and de-escalation techniques. I want that report on my desk by 9:00 a.m. Monday. Patricia nodded, tapping notes rapidly into her phone. Absolutely, Dr. Reynolds. I also want a review of every passenger complaint filed in the last 2 years that involved allegations of discrimination. I want to know how they were handled and by whom. Every incident, every response, every resolution. We'll pull the complete records, James Atkins, the CFO, interjected, eager to demonstrate his usefulness. Furthermore, Maya continued, you will draft a proposal for a new anonymous internal reporting system, a see something, say something policy that protects junior employees like Ms. Rodriguez from reprisal when they witness inappropriate conduct. I want employees to feel empowered to speak up next time, not paralyzed by fear of retaliation. She paused, making eye contact with each executive to ensure her message was unmistakable. Do you understand your directives? Yes. Dr. Reynolds? Patricia confirmed, her voice steadier now that she had clear tasks to focus on. A full audit, discrimination complaint review, and a new reporting system proposal. Monday, 9:00 a.m. Good, Maya said. Now address the passengers. Inform them of the delay and our resolution. We have inconvenienced them greatly. The brand must be seen taking full responsibility. Of course. Patricia nodded and reached for the intercom phone, her hand still trembling slightly. Maya finally walked past her into the now hushed first-class cabin and stopped at seat 1A. The pristine sealed blanket and pillow set were still there, a silent testament to the absurdity of the entire ordeal. She placed her leather messenger bag in the overhead compartment and slid into the plush seat. It was comfortable, spacious, and precisely what she had paid for. She looked across the aisle at Harrison in seat 1B. He was now staring at his phone with an intensity that suggested he was trying to achieve digital invisibility. He refused to meet her gaze. The woman behind him, however, caught Maya's eye and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod of respect. A moment later, Patricia Montgomery's voice, strained but regaining its corporate polish, filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is SkyEdge's Chief Operating Officer, Patricia Montgomery. On behalf of our entire airline, I want to offer my most profound and sincere apology for the unacceptable delay you have experienced today. We had a crew-related service failure that did not meet the uncompromising standards SkyEdge aspires to uphold. She paused, her voice gaining strength as she continued. To express our gratitude for your patience and as an apology for this disruption, SkyEdge will be issuing a full refund of the ticket price for every passenger on this aircraft. Additionally, a voucher for a future complimentary round-trip flight in your purchased cabin class will be deposited into your travel accounts within 48 hours. A murmur of surprised approval rippled through the cabin. A full refund and a free flight was an unprecedented level of compensation, a clear signal that this was no ordinary service failure. A new dedicated flight crew is now boarding, and we expect to be on our way to New York as swiftly as possible. We thank you for your understanding and patience. As promised, a new crew filed in, led by a calm, sharp-eyed purser in her early 40s. Isabella Hernandez, according to her name tag, moved with a quiet, hyper-efficient energy, her face a mixture of professionalism and barely concealed awe. The new crew had clearly been briefed on the situation. Isabella approached Maya's seat, her posture respectful but not obsequious. Dr. Reynolds, she said softly, it is an honor to have you with us. Please let me know if there is anything, absolutely anything, you or your fellow passengers require. We are here to ensure your journey is safe and comfortable. Thank you, Isabella, Maya replied, offering a faint, tired smile. A bottle of still water and a safe on-time arrival is all I ask. Consider it done, the purser said, with a crisp nod before moving away to direct her team. The cabin doors were finally sealed. The jet bridge retracted with a heavy thud. The engines began to spool up their deep, powerful hum, a sound of progress of moving forward. As the Boeing 737 pushed back from the gate and began its slow taxi toward the runway, Maya finally allowed herself to relax. She took out her tablet and pulled up the technical proposal she'd meant to review an hour ago, but she didn't read it. Instead, she looked out the window as the plane turned, accelerated, and lifted into the California sky. She felt no sense of victory, no thrill of revenge. There was only the grim, weary satisfaction of a critical problem identified and neutralized. The incident was a data point, a messy, ugly, but ultimately valuable piece of intelligence on the company she now had to reshape. The firings were not the end. They were merely the first necessary incision. The real work, rebuilding the culture, retraining the staff, and restoring the brand, started now. As she gazed out the window, Maya found herself thinking about Elena Rodriguez. The young flight attendant's fear had been genuine, her conflict visible. Perhaps there was potential there that had been stifled by a toxic environment. Perhaps under different leadership and with proper support, she might have found the courage to speak up. Maya made a mental note to have Dominic look into Elena's background and performance records. If the young woman showed promise, perhaps there might be a place for her elsewhere in the organization, not in customer-facing roles, but somewhere her experience could serve as a cautionary tale for others. That was the difference between retribution and reformation. The former sought only to punish. The latter aimed to build something better from the wreckage. The security officer, a tall woman with close-cropped hair and an impassive expression, gestured toward the jet bridge. "Ms. Barnes, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Parker, Ms. Rodriguez, this way, please." Victoria Barnes stood frozen, her makeup streaked with tears, the reality of her situation still not fully processed. "This is a mistake," she whispered more to herself than anyone around her. "This can't be happening." Richard Wilson moved mechanically, his earlier panic now replaced by a hollow resignation. 23 years with the airline gone in 10 minutes. His mortgage, his children's college funds, his retirement plans all suddenly cast into uncertainty. Captain Andrew Parker remained rigid, his jaw clenched so tightly that a muscle twitched visibly beneath his skin. His entire identity was bound up in his position. Without it, who was he? Elena Rodriguez moved last, her young face etched with devastation. 6 months into her dream career, she had witnessed its destruction and her own complicity in real time. Unlike the others, there was something else in her expression, a dawning recognition perhaps of the lesson Maya had tried to impart. "Reynolds," Elena said, gathering her courage. Her voice was steady despite the tears still glistening on her cheeks. "What happened today, it wasn't the first time. Victoria has done this before to other passengers. I've witnessed it multiple times. I knew it was wrong each time, but I convinced myself it wasn't my place to speak up." She took a deep breath, her gaze direct now despite her fear. "I understand why I'm being terminated. I failed not just you, but every passenger I stayed silent for. I won't make that mistake again wherever I go next. Some lessons cost more than others, but I promise you this one will stick." Maya studied the young woman, surprised by her clarity and accountability in this moment of personal crisis. Most people in Elena's position would be focused solely on self-preservation or blame. "The most valuable lessons often come at the highest price," Ms. Rodriguez Maya replied. "What matters is what you build with them." Elena nodded, a flash of something like determination crossing her features before she turned to follow her former colleagues. Now the security officer repeated her tone, brooking no argument. As they filed past Maya, each reacted differently to the proximity. Victoria kept her eyes down, unable to face the woman she had so grievously underestimated. Richard cast a pleading glance, a silent bid for mercy, that found no purchase. Captain Parker stared straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge Maya's existence even now. The galley suddenly felt larger without them. The space they had dominated with their prejudice and pride, now cleansed of their presence. Patricia Montgomery exhaled audibly, running a hand through her disheveled silver hair. "Dr. Reynolds, I cannot begin to express my—" "Save it," Maya cut her off, not unkindly but firmly. "This isn't about apologies. It's about action." Patricia nodded rapidly. "Of course. The audit, the review, the reporting system, all will be expedited. But there are immediate operational concerns. We need a replacement captain and crew. Already handled, James Atkins, the CFO, interjected, holding up his phone. Captain Sarah Lawson and her crew were dead heading to JFK on Flight 734. They're being rerouted here now. ETA 15 minutes. Maya nodded her approval. At least someone in SkyEdge's leadership knew how to solve problems efficiently. Olivia Wilson, the head of customer experience, stepped forward hesitantly. Dr. Reynolds, what about the passengers? We should offer some form of compensation for the delay and disruption. Full refunds for everyone on board, Maya stated without hesitation, plus complimentary round-trip tickets in their booked class. Implement immediately. Olivia's eyes widened. That's extremely generous. The financial impact will be negligible compared to the cost of litigation, regulatory scrutiny, and brand damage we'd face if even one passenger decided to make this incident public. Maya finished for her. This isn't generosity, Ms. Wilson. It's risk management. James Atkins nodded, already calculating the numbers. She's right. Full refunds and comps would cost us about $180,000 for this flight. A single discrimination lawsuit could run into millions, not counting the PR disaster. Exactly, Maya said. Now I want this new crew briefed properly. They need to understand that exceptional service is expected for the remainder of this flight. Every passenger must disembark in New York feeling that SkyEdge took extraordinary measures to correct a serious error. Patricia was already typing instructions into her phone. I'll personally brief Captain Lawson when she arrives. Good, Maya said. And one more thing. I want a complete review of Captain Parker's flight history. Every complaint, every incident report, every performance evaluation. I want to know if today was an aberration or a pattern. We'll pull his complete file, Patricia assured her. Maya nodded and turned toward her seat in the first-class cabin. I'll be monitoring the situation from here. Keep me informed of any issues. As she settled into seat 1A, Maya felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. The other passengers were watching with a mixture of awe, curiosity, and in some cases thinly veiled resentment. Power, especially when exercised so decisively, always evoked complex reactions. William Harrison, still in seat 1B, cleared his throat awkwardly. That was something else, he murmured, apparently feeling some obligation to acknowledge the extraordinary events. Maya turned to him with a neutral expression. It shouldn't have been. It should have been a routine boarding process, followed by an on-time departure. Harrison nodded, chastened by her response. Of course. I just meant, well, I've never seen anything quite like that. That's the problem, Mr. Harrison, Maya replied quietly. These incidents happen every day to people who don't have the power to make them stop. The only unusual aspect of today was the consequence. He had no response to that. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, he returned his attention to his phone, his earlier smirk nowhere to be seen. From behind, Maya heard a soft voice. Thank you. She turned to find a young black woman in seat 2A, leaning forward slightly. I've been in that situation, the woman continued, more times than I can count, but I never had the ability to do anything about it. Watching you, it was justice. Maya offered her a small, genuine smile, the first since the ordeal began. What's your name, Zoe? Zoe Taylor. I'm heading to a job interview in New York. What field? Zoe? Aerospace engineering, actually. I just finished my master's at Caltech. Maya reached into her bag and extracted a business card. A simple, elegant design with only her name, title, and contact information. She handed it to the younger woman. When you're done with your interview, call my office. We're always looking for talented engineers at Horizon Dynamics. Zoe's eyes widened as she read the card, recognition dawning. You're that Dr. Reynolds, the quantum propulsion pioneer? Maya nodded slightly. The very same. Your work on low-energy plasma containment changed the entire field. Zoe said, awe evident in her voice. Your papers were required reading in my advanced propulsion seminar. Then I look forward to hearing about your interview, Maya replied, and perhaps discussing your own ideas. Not all passengers shared Zoe's appreciation, however. From across the aisle, Maya overheard a middle-aged white couple whispering. That was completely excessive, the woman murmured. She could have handled it privately later. Typical power trip, her husband agreed. Making a scene just because she can. Maya neither reacted nor responded to these comments. Their perspective was limited, their judgment uninformed. They had not experienced what she had experienced not just today, but throughout her life. They saw only the swift consequence, not the context that made it necessary. From her vantage point, Maya could observe the various reactions throughout the cabin. Some passengers seemed impressed, others uncomfortable, a few openly supportive, and a handful visibly disapproving. It was a microcosm of broader social attitudes, all contained within the confines of a first-class cabin. Their conversation was interrupted by Patricia Montgomery's return to the cabin. Dr. Reynolds, Captain Lawson, and her crew have arrived. They're completing the handover procedures now. We should be ready for departure in approximately 10 minutes. Excellent, Maya responded. And the former crew security is escorting them to the administrative offices for processing. Their credentials have been deactivated and Human Resources has been notified to prepare their final documentation. Maya nodded her approval. Keep me informed of any issues. As Patricia returned to the galley, Maya noticed a subtle shift in the cabin's atmosphere. The initial shock was fading, replaced by a collective recognition that they were witnessing something historic. A rare moment when power was used not for personal advancement or petty retribution, but for necessary correction. Outside the windows, ground crews moved with renewed urgency. Word had clearly spread throughout the airport operation that this flight now had the highest priority. Fueling was completed, baggage was secured, and catering supplies were loaded with exceptional efficiency. In the cockpit, Captain Sarah Lawson, a veteran pilot with an impeccable record, was methodically reviewing the flight plan. Unlike her predecessor, she understood that authority was earned through competence and character, not conferred by uniform and title. Isabella Hernandez, the new purser, moved through the cabin with quiet efficiency, checking on passengers, answering questions, and ensuring that every detail was addressed. Her team followed her lead, their service attentive without being obsequious. The cabin doors closed with a definitive thud. The jet bridge withdrew, and the aircraft began its push back from the gate. Maya felt a strange mixture of emotions as the engines spooled up to taxi power. There was no satisfaction in destroying careers, even those that deserved ending. There was only the grim determination to ensure that the culture that enabled such behavior was thoroughly reformed. As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, a secure message appeared on her phone from Dominic Regulatory. Filing for acquisition completion accelerated. PR team prepared for announcement. How soon do you want to go public? Maya considered briefly, then typed immediate. This incident has forced our hand. Better to control the narrative than respond to it. Draft announcement emphasizing our commitment to transforming the passenger experience through dignity and respect. She paused, then added, and look into Elena Rodriguez's record and background. If she shows promise, consider a position in the new corporate ethics program. Sometimes the most effective advocates for change are those who have witnessed the consequences of its absence. 6 months after the incident on Flight 719, Maya Reynolds stood at the podium in SkyEdge's newly redesigned training center in Dallas. Before her 200 employees, a mix of veterans and new hires, had gathered for the graduation ceremony of the company's Transform Service Training Program. When we began this journey, Maya addressed the assembled staff. Many questioned whether the changes we proposed were realistic or sustainable. They wondered if excellence could truly become standard rather than exceptional. They asked if a company culture could be fundamentally reshaped in a matter of months. She gestured to the screens behind her, which displayed the latest performance metrics. Customer satisfaction scores up 31%, complaint rates down 47%, employee retention improved by 24%. These numbers provide one answer, but the real evidence is not in statistics, it's in the daily experiences of our passengers and in your renewed pride in the SkyEdge name. The training center itself symbolized the transformation that had occurred. Gone were the sterile corporate aesthetics and outdated service philosophies. In their place was a dynamic learning environment designed to prepare staff for real-world challenges, complete with simulation cabins and interactive scenario-based training. Leading the graduating class was Elena Rodriguez, who had not only accepted the position in the ethics department, but had subsequently developed a widely praised training module on bystander intervention based on her own experience. Her journey from silent witness to vocal advocate had become a powerful narrative within the company. True change is never easy, Maya continued. We faced resistance, skepticism, and occasionally outright opposition. Some long-time employees chose to leave rather than adapt to our new standards. Several managers initially tried to maintain the status quo through passive resistance. She paused, acknowledging the challenging reality of organizational transformation. The media questioned our methods. Competitors predicted our failure. Even some of our own executives doubted whether passengers would notice or care about the changes we were implementing. Those challenges had been substantial. Victoria Barnes and Captain Parker had both struggled to find employment in the industry after their terminations. Their wrongful termination lawsuits had been quickly dismissed when the full evidence of their conduct was presented. Industry analysts initially predicted that the excessive focus on customer experience would undermine profitability. But SkyEdge had weathered these storms. The Flight Attendants Union eventually became a partner in developing realistic standards after Maya demonstrated her commitment to supporting employees who upheld company values. And the financial results had silenced the skeptics' customer loyalty, and repeat bookings had increased significantly more than offsetting the costs of the transformation. What we've built together over these months isn't just a better airline, Maya said, her voice resonating through the atrium. It's a model of what's possible when an organization truly aligns its practices with its values. When excellence isn't just a slogan, but a lived reality. In the front row sat Patricia Montgomery, who had embraced the transformation with unexpected vigor once she understood Maya's vision. Beside her was Isabella Hernandez, now Vice President of Service Operations, whose insights had proven invaluable in redesigning training and protocols. The incident that catalyzed these changes was painful, Maya acknowledged, but it revealed something essential: that how we respond to failure matters more than the failure itself. That accountability isn't about punishment, it's about growth. And that dignity isn't a luxury service upgrade, it's the foundation of everything we do. As she concluded her remarks, Maya spotted a familiar face in the audience: Zoe Taylor, the young engineer she had met on Flight 719, now leading a special projects team at Horizon Dynamics. Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement of how a single interaction had changed multiple trajectories. The SkyEdge that existed today was not the same company Maya had encountered in that first-class cabin 6 months ago. It had been transformed not through slogans or superficial policy changes, but through a fundamental recommitment to human dignity as its operational core. Every interaction matters, Maya said, gesturing to the company's new guiding principle displayed prominently on the wall. Not just for the passenger experiencing it, but for all of us who choose to be part of this organization. Thank you for making that choice. Thank you for your commitment to excellence. And thank you for proving that meaningful change is possible when we have the courage to demand it. This story isn't just about one CEO's experience with discrimination or one company's transformation. It's about the power we all have to stand up for what's right, to demand respect, and to create change in our own spheres of influence. If you've ever been in a situation where you felt powerless against prejudice, or watched injustice unfold without speaking up, let this be your reminder. Change begins with courage, and sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect is calm, unwavering dignity. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of justice and transformation. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of their own worth and power. Together we can build a world where respect isn't exceptional, it's expected.